Hey guys, time for another Q&A. It's been about 10 days since the last one, I think. So I was out of town for 4 days. So picking back up now, and it is December 5th, 2018. It was open Q&A this week since I was a little behind, and we'll get right into it. So Instagram questions, start with those. All right. All right, so first one, I've seen mixed views on the best form of vitamin B12, methyl, or cyano. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Cyano. What's your preference and why? And is it worth nitpicking? Okay, so the main difference between the two is one is methylated, so the methyl B12, and the cyano is what you'd see typically in, I don't know, like if you were to see B12 added to like a food product, or even most supplements. I can say most, but a lot of supplements add that form. That's what I would consider just a regular form of B12. Now, the advantage to the methylated is that it does not require intrinsic factor in your stomach to utilize it. So think of it like, I'll sometimes call it activated B vitamins. That would be an example. You don't have to process it essentially to utilize it. Now, is it necessary to use that form? Not for everybody, for sure. I wouldn't say that for everybody. I mean, most people could get on and see their serum B12 levels on lab works plenty high. Most people, even without supplementing with B12 at all, just because they get so much B12 in a higher protein diet, especially with meat. So yeah, I mean, probably not. Now, if someone has B12 deficiency or like pernicious anemia, then yeah, they would probably want to use the methylated form, just because a lot of people, I find, I wouldn't say Gen Pop, because Gen Pop, they genuinely may not be consuming enough B12, but in our population that is probably consuming plenty of B12, it's normally an absorption issue. So they're just not absorbing enough of the B12, in which case they would want to use the methyl form so it doesn't require that intrinsic factor. I was actually in that boat. Found out I was pretty B12 deficient at one time, and I had no idea why, obviously, because I was eating I was eating so much meat, and I had taken a multivitamin and all that jazz at the time, and I was getting plenty of B12, but I was not taking the correct form. I needed methylated B12, and that raised it right up. So methylated or injectable would be the thing. But again, a lot of people probably don't need extra B12. But if you do have signs and symptoms of something like anemia, I'd check into it. I'd get your B12 serum checked on your next set of lab work. Super cheap. It's not expensive to do. You can even throw all your other B vitamins in there while you're at it. Check your folates and everything if you're going to do it. So, yep, that is methyl B12. Okay. Next one is, all right, thoughts on Ostarine use for female competitors, experiences, recommendations. Okay, so this Ostarine, the SARM for females, yeah, I think it, if you look around and just look at feedback that a lot of people have given on it, it tends to be tolerated pretty well in females. In fact, I would say that's probably one of the best uses for Ostarines, probably in females. Probably one of the easiest ones to recover from, probably one of the best tolerated, even at a higher dose. It's pretty anabolic, even at a high dose, it is pretty well tolerated. I personally have never seen side effects from it in anybody. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't happen. I mean, dose dependent, and person dependent, it could surely happen, but I just don't really see side effects in it very often. Now, you will have some of the traditional side effects you would get from other anabolics, like it can impact your lipids and things like that to some degree. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, I don't I think that that's a good option, you know, if we're talking about in the context of the other choices. It's a good option. Females, I mean, could start as low as maybe 10 milligrams, go up 10, 15, 20 even. But yeah, and I've seen females use a lot higher than 20, but you know, usually like 25 to maybe 50 is more of a male dose, but I've seen plenty of females use a male dose and be fine as well. So take that all with a grain of salt, of course. It's always good to get more from less and be cautious initially if you don't know what your what your tolerance is. So yes. All right. One more on here. We'll jump over. Look, I actually posted in here, let's cut it off this time, and it actually cut off. Amazing. All right, so next one. What can signal an increase in resting heart rate during a push or blast or mass phase outside of lack of cardiovascular fitness, i.e. certain compounds, stressors, deficiencies, etc.? Well, I mean, typically you're heavier, there's a little bit more oxygen debt, requires more oxygen just in general. People tend to see their heart rate raise faster and they're out of breath quicker because they're heavier. Speaking of which, now you mentioned besides lack of cardiovascular fitness, well, I mean, a lot of that can be cardiovascular related, but it could be other things like water retention and things of that nature. Now, could be just stress, systemic stress, raising resting heart rate. So you could maybe look into something like your HRV, heart rate variability. If you think it's maybe stress related, your heart rate can be altered that way. But yeah, it's most likely just from like carrying around more weight, if anything, because I'm not really a lot of context on here, so I would assume it's probably something related to that. All right, so let's see. We will jump over to the Facebook questions. Let's see what we have. Next one. Red face, sticking out gut, and steroids. Is there any connection between any of them? I know nothing fancy, but it's bloody annoying. Red face, yeah. Blood pressure, just water retention, blood pressure, lack of kidney function, or whatever might be going on there. That could surely be related. High hematocrit, hemoglobin, things like that. You get that reddish, purpley colored person, that's probably not a great thing. They need to check those things: blood pressure, blood viscosity. Gut sticking out, probably not really. Growing muscle in general is going to cause, your gut can grow. Your abs can grow, your obliques can grow, all those things can grow in proportion though. If it's growing faster than your other muscles are growing, that's a problem. But gut, if you're just talking about gut sticking out, that's probably digestion related, just for too much food, something digestion related. Normally, it can be lack of like TVA, transverse abdominis control, but in general, the protrusion is probably from just something GI related, to be honest, for most people. And off-season insulin use without GH would MK677 have synergistic benefit, and cost versus benefit for using insulin pre-workout compared to using pre and post-workout. Okay, so, and then somebody else asked about MK77 piggyback. Given everyone reacts different to your to MK and its effects on blood glucose, do you think it can be used if the person's monitored their fasting glucose and has no ill effect on it? Or is it more complicated than that? And then there was a whole thread of comments on there. Nice little discussion. But if it's real MK, it's going to increase your blood glucose to some extent. Pretty much that happens in everybody. It's part of the mechanism. Now, okay, so first off, I feel like I should just talk about MK for a second, and then that will make everything else make more sense. So MK is not good for a couple of reasons, and there's people that have used it, yes, but it is primarily, we'll talk about fat loss and muscle growth. So for hypertrophy, if you're primarily increasing IGF, okay, so it does increase IGF, we know this. All right, people have had lab work done, right? All right, but if it's primarily increasing endocrine IGF, meaning you're pulsing, right? Because it's a secretagogue. It's like, think of a GHRH and GHRP. Sorry. Think of like peptide combo pulsing, pulsing your endogenous growth hormone. Getting a similar effect here is just long acting, so the pulses are just happening like random times, more or less, for the simplicity of this discussion. And we don't really want all of that endocrine IGF. We more so want autocrine, paracrine IGF production. So that would be why there could be an argument for something like intramuscular growth hormone versus subcutaneous when we're talking about hypertrophy. So fat loss is a little bit different. But when we're talking about hypertrophy, if you can get that effect, then there might be some benefit versus the endocrine, which is just circulating basically systemically wherever. And intramuscular GH is going to go systemic too, but if you can localize some of it, that's a benefit, of course. All right, so now for fat loss, if we want to look at peptides in general, like the short-acting peptides, so like GHRP2, 6, ipamorelin, talk about your GHRHs, so like CJC, no DAC, or mod GRF 129. So like those peptides are short-acting. You can control the timing of the pulse. So in theory, yes, you can get a free fatty acid release, and you can utilize those free fatty acids doing something like fasted cardio or fasted activity. With MK, you really can't, because it's so long acting that you don't know when the pulses are going to be, and it's completely random. So it's really pretty much useless for fat loss because you can't time it correctly, and you're not really gonna be able to utilize the free fatty acid release. You just don't. It's going to be difficult to do. So that's that. In terms of insulin without GH, okay, so there's a strong synergy there with GH, yes, and there's a strong IGF synergy there as well. Now, by itself, you do lose a lot of the growth, not a lot. I mean, some of the growth potential without GH. Now, what you do get is potentially the benefits in nutrient partitioning and resting your beta cells in your pancreas and just taking some of the load off of them, because you're introducing exogenous GH that's supporting your endogenous production. So, you see your pancreas is getting hammered with carbs, and then you're just constantly seeing your blood sugar go up and up and up. Well, if you can use an exogenous insulin, it will help. It's going to help control that. It's going to rest your pancreas some. It's going to probably what you're going to benefit from most is probably going to be able to extend the period of your off season before you need to cut again, or before you need to resensitize again, because you can, dare I say, stay leaner by using it potentially, if depending on how you're controlling your blood glucose. Calories are still king there, of course, but that would be an argument for potentially using it by itself if they weren't able to utilize the GH. Now, as far as costs for pre and post, you could say just pre, because obviously there's going to be, if you do post too, there's probably a little bit of overlap depending on what you're using. Not a lot, but there's probably some. So you could maybe just say pre is going to carry for a while. But yeah, I mean, you can do both. Essentially, as long as there's enough gap and not a ton of overlap, it could really be used with any carbohydrate meal, just to, again, take that load off your pancreas and not have to, and not become insulin resistant as quickly. Now it could be any meal, though. It doesn't necessarily have to be pre and post workout, but I understand, people are trying to get that little extra insulin and drive the nutrients if they're using like a lot of intra-workout goodies and stuff. So yeah, definitely. But pre and post together is fine as well. Pre-post, if you're eating carbs in multiple meals a day, it's fine. It's like people have a very skewed idea of insulin in that using more isn't necessarily worse if you're controlling your blood sugar with it. So it's really more about application and control. It can almost be healthier. And again, context here, we're talking about, you're talking about a drug, but yeah, you could argue that it's maybe healthier by controlling your blood sugar. So next one, I'm just babbling. Next one. Ankles swelling up sometimes when standing up a decent part of the day. Okay. Well, I mean, the standing could be, you may just need better shoes. If you're standing up a lot of the day, I would strongly suggest custom orthotics. You can go to a chiropractor or something and get them. Sometimes you can get insurance to cover them too through a chiropractor. Sometimes you can't. Mine did, actually, and I didn't really have very good insurance, but they covered them. I'm not sure what my chiropractor wrote on there to get them to cover them, but they covered them. I would definitely suggest those if you're walking a ton during the day or standing up during the day and you have those types of problems. Corrective orthotics like that are going to balance your gait, and they're going to balance, if you have a one foot that tilts or something, like something a little funky here, wherever. One's got a higher arch than the other. You got a short leg. I don't know, any of that stuff. The molding is going to help correct all that stuff so you're balanced when you're standing. So I would probably look into that. And you might be able to do a little bit of self-diagnosis there too if you just stand stand in front of a mirror, let's say, and you just stand, close your eyes, and then open your eyes. Look, do you have a shoulder? Do you have a shoulder that's dropped? Do you have one that's up? Do you have like a tilted forward on one side, or a hip that's shifted, or anything like that? You can kind of look at. You might need some chiropractic work. You might need some kind of soft tissue work. You might need somebody to do some range of motion correction. There's therapists that do that stuff too. So I would probably try to figure out, okay, why is it swelling? Is it just a support issue in your shoes or what? But yeah. Okay. I think that's the last one. Hammered those pretty quick. So thanks for the questions, guys, and I will talk to y'all soon.